Ladies and gentlemen, DJ Preposterous today.
Hello, all y'all out there in Radio Land. We did a very special introduction. That was the band Systemista covering Cypress Hill's classic Hits from the Bong. We're going to be talking about all the ballot initiatives and do some election analysis on the program today. But, I mean, if you've been living under a stone, yes, it is true. Proposition 1 has puff passed. Yep. Oh, yeah. By the way, this is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo.
It passed on my birthday.
Yeah,
today is my birthday.
Happy birthday,
yes,
Lawrence.
It's my birthday. So, yeah, it is.
Before we get into it, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo or Western Michigan University. So, election was last night. I was up fairly late. We had a couple of really close ones.
Oh yeah, I was up all night, and then I passed out with my computer in my lap, looking like yo, what's going on? Yo, like what's going on? Yo, what's going on in California? Yo, what in the world's going on? Dog, Nevada, Nevada. Charlemagne, the guy, gave y'all donkey of the day, and y'all definitely deserved it. How the hell y'all gonna vote a dead man, a dead pimp? Y'all voted a dead pimp to the state assembly. Y'all deserve donkey of the day for the next month.
Was his pimp game? Was his pimp game really that strong?
Oh man,
it must have been.
Okay, here's the thing. Yeah. The dude that won, he was the host of a HBO reality brothel show. Mm-hmm. He wrote a book called The Art of the Pimp. Yep. I forget his name. David Hoss or whatever his name. I think that might be his name. He was running against a actual scholar, a literal scholar in the Democratic Party. Yep. And he died October 18th. He died 23 days ago. and he won, and the Republican Party in Nevada kept him on the ballot. I'm like, y'all kept a dead man on the ballot?
Yeah, I was actually talking to my roommate about that before I left, and it's like, she was asking me, it's like, how does that work? It's like, I don't know.
Dog.
I would think you'd have to find a different candidate.
So what's going to happen there is that they're going to have some people from the majority party. They're going to have some people from the majority party or the Republican Party give someone who they feel should be in the seat. They're going to vote for somebody to be in the seat. And then from there, people in Nevada is going to have to vote to have him voted in.
Yeah.
But it's no longer going back to the hands of the people since the people voted for a dead pimp.
I should specify too. Republicans voted for a dead pimp. Let's see, he was running on the GOP ticket.
Here's the thing. That does not surprise me in the Republican Party at all. We've had a pedophile. We had people who are accused of sexual misconduct of women, and y'all put a dead pimp on a dead reality star pimp. Like, here's the thing.
Yep, that sounds about right.
Here's the thing. Like, the thing that makes me laugh is like it wasn't Bishop Don Magic Wand. Like, it wasn't Bishop Don Magic Wand. It couldn't be a black pimp. It had to be a legal brothel owner that happened to be an older white guy who fashions himself to, like Trump. Oh my God, that was one of the funniest things that I've been laughing about all day today.
Yeah.
All right.
I will say, state of Michigan, we actually got off pretty well in this election.
I mean, you want to start local and then branch out?
Yeah. One of the things that I was really paying a lot of attention to, a lot of other people maybe not so much. But, I feel like this was a really important year for the school board election. And, a couple of things that go into that. This was about a year ago, and, we covered it on the show. But there was a big controversy about the principal, Loy Norrix, who basically got ousted because they did not vet him properly. It'd been discovered he did some sexual harassment down in was it Florida or Georgia, Lawrence? Do you remember?
I do not remember.
Yeah, one of them states.
Look. As a former knight 06, I was so disgusted when I heard. I absolutely tuned out of that whole situation. Not because it wasn't relevant. It was just that, dog. My heart hurt. Yeah. My soul hurt. I was like, oh man.
But I think it's probably like one of the biggest bits of good news if you live in Kalamazoo that you might not have really even heard about on election day. But it was Tandy Moore and Jermaine Jackson who got elected. We actually interviewed Tandy on the show a couple weeks back.
I rocks with Jermaine. I mean, there's some things that Jermaine talks about that I may be like, this is a little sketchy, but overall, I rock with Jermaine. I think Jermaine's cool. I would like to have him on the show. We should definitely get him on the show.
I've been hitting him up. Maybe now that he's actually on the board. And you know what? The key couple of things with both of them is, I've kind of sat down. I've talked to both of them about like the issues involving like that kind of sexual harassment in school. Also, really focusing on more equity and parity. Particularly, we talk about like the Kalamazoo Promise a lot. It still has a ways to go before it is a really effective program for who it was originally pitched as like this will help all of the folks in like the south side, the north side be able to go out and get a public a college education. I think there's been some big gaps in like you need some like after school and community programs to kind of fill in the gaps there. You're not just going to like be able to accomplish this entryism overnight. You need people who are experts in those communities to help out and help organize there.
I definitely have an issue with some of the new changes that they're trying to bring to the education. The education of Kalamazoo, taking out key civil rights and or civil rights context in the history books, changing up language about when it comes to LGBT issues in our history books. Basically, not discussing dissent, which is the core of America. Airing out one's grievances in a constructive manner so that you can get productive change. I think that's one of my biggest issues that when it comes to said issue with the school board. That pamphlet that the information that we was talking about. That's a conversation that I would want to have with Jermaine.
Oh yeah. I will say, to their credit, especially I know Tandy actually was doing like some organizing around that atrocious those atrocious curriculum changes, but I know they're both aware of it, and like they've really stood out and be like, yeah, we will do what we need to do to defend KPS from these bogus curriculum changes by a lot of basically just real quick. We've talked about it on the show before, but basically a bunch of right-wing reactionaries at the Michigan Department of Education want to kind of rewrite the history books more or less to take out a lot of the history of like civil disobedience and social struggle, et cetera, et cetera.
They basically want to manufacture consent, but not doing it in the way that Noam Chomsky talked about. They want to do it. They want to start when you are young, so that you do not have the thought process to question authority when it comes to the issues of what your authority is doing with your money, your taxpayer money, on your behalf. And that is an issue. Or not understanding when people have grievances. Having a understanding of how you should air out said grievances when you feel that change has not happened productively.
Yeah, that's right. And also, kind of moving on now, probably the biggest blowout of the night. And there's two local elections that I found really surprising. In a good way. Kudos to them. So Sean McCann, he... if you remember the last election, he lost to Margaret O'Brien by less than 100 votes. He actually even had a recount. It was razor close. And I think a lot of people were kind of expecting it to be similar this time. Maybe he would win by a similarly close margin, but it was a blowout. He won by 11 points. Roughly about 12,000 votes. Over Margaret O'Brien, which, I think, I don't know if you how much can you credit it towards the actual messaging of the state Senate candidates? How much can you credit towards the fact that, it's a midterm, and particularly, voter turnout is just super high. You've got a lot of people who were going to vote Democrat anyway coming in to fill his oval. But,
let's be honest. There was a blue wave. The blue wave should have been bigger. It should have been bigger because of the horrible policies that the Republican Party have put in place federally, and how that trickled down statewide and locally. There was some outstanding victories, especially in Michigan. So kudos to everyone who came out and voted. Even if you didn't vote straight down ticket, I didn't. I vote I'm not gonna lie to you, I didn't vote for Gretchen Whitmore. She was my third. She was my third choice. I voted for the Green Party candidate.
Same here. Yeah, she's on the show last week.
It's not because I didn't like Gretchen Whitmore. It's just that she she was moved more to the left because of Abdul Al-Said.
Yeah.
No question about it. She was definitely pulled more to a progressive platform. Within that same token, do I feel like she's actually going to move forward on the things that she's been saying? I'm for her when it comes to infrastructure bill. I'm for her if she's going to back the legalization, regulation, and taxation of marijuana. But I also want to see those that have been affected by said legalization, who's been criminalized for it, their sentences being appealed, because people still being in jail because of something that's now legal in the state is a problem. And also that taxpayer money that's being taxed because of legalized marijuana not going back into the communities that were affected by the war on drugs is also a problem. So I want to see her move forward on those issues. The fact that she doesn't back Medicare for all, the fact that she doesn't back Medicare for all, that was a horrible. That's a litmus test thing for me, and she is not for that. So, but I'm glad that she won. I'm definitely glad that she won.
Well, I don't know if you saw, there was actually an article in MLive where she was talking about that today, and I thought I sent it in the group message. Let me try to dig it up. But the what it essentially boils down to is, she's saying, now that it is the letter of the law, that it is, legal and recreationally, here it is. That there should, that people in Michigan, she says, conduct that would not be considered legal, no one should bear a lifelong record for that conduct. So she's talking about expunging criminal records for people with marijuana-based offenses. And she goes on to say, in this particular article, she's going to work with Dana Nessel, and we'll talk about her a little bit more in depth in a few minutes.
Yeah.
But, this kind of brings up I will get back to the Kalamazoo stuff, but this brings up a really important point, I think, which is, so Gretchen won the governorship, and like you said, she has been pushed. You might even say dragged to the left on a lot of issues.
She's been dragged. Yeah. Let's not mix words. Yeah. Nah, baby girl's been dragged, kicking and screaming. But I am glad that she's there. I'm glad that she's here.
Yeah, and I think it's important too, because even we criticize the Democratic Party. Emotions run high. A certain a little bit of tribalism sets in. I define. My ideology is probably closer to I'd say I'm an anarcho-socialist or something. But even then, last night I could catch myself being like, oh man, I hope the red team doesn't get such and such a seat. And here's the distinction here. I think our friend Jessica said it best. Jessica Martin was the vice chair of the Young Democrats of Michigan. On the night that Gretchen won the primary, she wrote about her frustration of now here's a candidate who, she comes governor, we are going to have to babysit her. We are going to have to make sure that she actually is pushed to do the good thing instead of the corporate thing. Because you make no mistake, she does have some policy planks that would be good for the people, but her actual ability or desire to follow through on those things is going to be completely dependent on grassroots organizing from people like us.
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear. This election was a victory. It was a victory for a liberal and progressive side, but at the same time, it's just a chapter in the book. This is not the whole book.
No.
We have to be vigilant, and we have to make sure that we keep these people accountable. I mean, Gretchen won, but Matt Long John lost. And we still have Fred Upton running in the 6th. Now, I've said during the primary, because I voted for David Benack. I think David Benack still would have won. That's just my opinion. I don't think Matt ran an aggressive enough campaign against Fred.
I actually did, and I have like a bit of a discussion with you about this because I'm of two minds. One, I do want to give kudos to Matt. I think that Matt ran a good race.
He ran a good race,
and it is the closest Fred has come to being defeated ever.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I'm trying to think like what are the lessons we can take away from this? What worked, and kind of furthermore, like what didn't, and kind of speaking to like he wasn't aggressive enough on certain things. It's like I remember especially like early on when I was really involved in like Dim Enter and I was talking to people like Matt a lot of the strategic advice that was going his way from a lot of the progressives was zero in on the fact that he's a corporate puppet. I'm talking about Fred Upton because he's polite, he's nice, and as we saw, about 50% of the district at least is okay with a corporate shill as long as they have good manners.
Basically,
yeah.
Like because when you look at the breakdown of the map, especially in the 6, there's 4 counties in the 6th district. You have Kalamazoo, Allegan, Benton Harbor area, and Calhoun, right?
Yep, and St. Joe, Van Buren, part of it too.
So Kalamazoo went for Matt.
Yeah,
it was the largest district. It went for Matt. It's the same district that voted for Bernie Sanders. So overwhelmingly voted for Bernie Sanders. So yeah, the other districts, I don't know if he was reaching out to the people out there. I don't know if Matt was reaching out to the black community in Benton Harbor and in St. Joe. I don't know if he was reaching out to those communities. These are things that when I look at the candidate, you gotta look at the demographic. I don't know if he was reaching out and talking to these people in these districts about how Fred Upton wants to cut your health care. I want to give you health care with single payer health care. Making your case. Because if you're going to run, if you pull a Beto and you're nice, like Beto O'Rourke, he was nice to Ted Cruz. In certain areas around Michigan, being nice is not the way to win. You have to be aggressive.
Yeah.
And the best way to be aggressive is to say, Fred Upton, he's a corrupt politician and he's trying to sell you out. He gave millions of dollars of tax cuts to the rich, and he is going to raise your taxes over the next 10 years. He doesn't care about environmental change. The water in a lot of southern Michigan have lead issues or contaminants. He doesn't believe in EPA regulation to fix said stuff. There's ways that you can beat Fred Upton, but you gotta be aggressive. You can't be nice.
Yeah, and kind of following on that, I actually do have a little bit of insight about like his outreach strategy, and it's kind of the same. It's the same. One of the same missteps that Paul made in his runs, focusing so much on Kalamazoo. Now, I will give it to Matt. He did focus a little bit on the other outside areas, probably more so than Paul Clemence's campaign did, but probably not to the degree that he really needed to. And I'd also say one of the problems is he fell into the trap, man. They started tossing out these allegations about he's not actually a doctor, and he wants to abolish ICE, and he wants to cut military funding. And what you do in that situation is you don't go on the defensive, you go on the offensive. I wanted to hear him say it in that debate. It's yes, I want to audit the Pentagon. I want to rein in our military spending. Here is how Fred Upton has contributed to our gluttonous military budget. Or here, don't just, because even in the debates and whatnot, he gets kind of made allusions to it. Sometimes when people get big donations from corporations, people think there's some influence there. Nah, man, no. You go out there and you be like, here's how much Fred Upton is getting from Verizon Wireless. Here's how he voted on net neutrality. Boom, right? You got to make it very explicit, and like you said, you got to be aggressive about it. And,
you got to. I mean, let's be clear. I mean, this is going to be more of our national conversation, but there's a way to run. You can be kind while telling the truth. You know what I'm saying? You could be kind and like Andrew Gillum. Andrew Gillum lost, but the message that he did in the debate when he said, "Look, I'm not calling you racist. I'm just saying that the people who support you think that you're racist because they're racist."
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying? That you could be nice and tell the truth. The problem is that what we have is that, yes, we have a very large red district when you look at the county outside of Kalamazoo, and we're going to end gerrymandering. So, we're going to end gerrymandering. Who knows
what will happen in a few years then?
And we're actually going to, with Proposal 3, add more people to the voting rolls in Michigan because you'll automatically be able to become registered when you get a state ID, or in other things of that nature, which are all great things. I think those are all fantastic things. I would go even further if with Proposal 3 and just say and make Michigan the first state where voting day is a holiday. Everybody's off work. That would have been push it even further. That would have been the thing that I would have wanted to see from Proposal 3. But I'm glad Proposal 3 happened. I'm also glad Proposal 1 happened. So it'd be like,
by the way, just FYI to everybody out there, don't be walking down the street with a big fat blunt just yet. It is still technically illegal. And it's going to be illegal until about the 26th, or possibly sooner, but the 26th is when a Secretary of State has to verify the election results. And as of that verification, marijuana will be legal. I mean, even when I'm talking about it kind of in a blasé way, like, oh, just walking down the street smoking a blunt, the actual nuance of the law.
Okay, folks, just be reasonable. Be reasonable and be smart. Don't do it in the park. Don't do it when you're at a restaurant. Don't do it when you go see a movie. Like, be smart. Do it in your house. Do it at your neighbor's house.
Like,
you know what I'm saying?
On your porch even.
Right. If you are in your car, hit it one time and then let it go. Okay?
Actually, there is part of this law. It's going to be illegal to smoke in your car, even if you're not like moving. So that's important too.
Here's the problem. I don't mind if you're going to. I don't mind a law saying you cannot smoke and drive. You cannot smoke and drive. You know what? I'm okay with that. You know, I'm absolutely okay with that. I think that's cool. If it's a parked car, though. If it's a parked car, you're not going anywhere, you're not moving, you're just going to your car. I'm like, that's when I have a problem, because that's an overreach. If I'm not driving, then there's nothing to worry about. But driving while under the influence is a thing. So I do agree with that. But yeah, folks, be reasonable. Be reasonable. Don't be stupid. Don't go to the local park and blow one. You know what I'm saying? Just stay at your house. This also makes things very interesting in Kalamazoo, because Kalamazoo did not want to. Kalamazoo is making it extraordinarily hard to open up a dispensary because of how much you have to put.
Expensive. Yeah.
Yes, extraordinarily expensive to open up a dispensary, since marijuana will be legal now. The amount of groweries and the amount and maybe dispensaries that people will and maybe that will be some legislation that we can see change in Kalamazoo.
Yeah, I'd actually want to go further than that, and it's like, now that we're talking about Prop 1, there's a couple points I really wanted to bring up. Specifically that, like, if you are interested in cannabis justice or part of the marijuana, cannabis justice movement, the job's only halfway done.
Yeah,
it's legal, but now there's two things that really I think social justice advocates need to pay attention to. One is putting pressure on people like Gretchen Whitmer and Dana Nessel to expunge those records and grant clemency to those who've been imprisoned because of the war on drugs. There's also an economic component to it. As you just mentioned, the way that the system currently is for dispensaries really prohibits working class people from starting these kind of dispensary businesses. And right now, we are going to be in the process at the state level. State lawmakers are basically going to be able to tweak and modify and basically decide what legal marijuana in the state is going to look like. So I would really recommend everybody, please stay focused and pay a lot of attention to this issue, because there's a lot of stuff that can happen between now and when we've actually got like marijuana rules and regulations on the books.
Here's the thing, just about marijuana justice. There was a couple other states that also legalized marijuana as well for medical and recreational use, and some of those states were red states. So clap your hands, clap your hands. Like that prohibition is going to be over very soon, dog. Like within the next 4 to 6 years, dog. It's going to end up being nationwide, because you can only studies have shown that medical marijuana and recreational marijuana in America hurts the cartels, hurts cartels funding. Another thing is that medical marijuana and recreational marijuana also helps cut back on opioid uses. And another thing is also that it's a freedom issue. So if you care about liberty, you care about justice, and you care about your rights, it's arresting someone for marijuana is like arresting someone for having a beer. When studies have shown that marijuana does not in any way, shape, or form marijuana is not as dangerous as alcohol. So the idea that it's taking this long for us to get the justice that the justice for people who's been arrested for this drug is ridiculous, when studies have shown that, one, it hasn't killed anybody, and two, it's safer for you than cigarettes or alcohol, and it also helps cut back on the opioid epidemic, and it also helps fight cancer. So I mean, like we have been used to the scare tactic of marijuana being associated with black people, being associated with Mexicans, and we know that the federal justice war on crime was to arrest hippies and black people when they started it. But now people are waking up and they're being hip to the game, and we're moving forward, man. That was a big step. There was a lot of propositions that passed yesterday. That was a big step. But keeping in the theme right now, since we're talking about local stuff, this is a good step in the chapter. We closed that chapter. Now we have to move forward and move forward.
All right, I think it'd be a good time to take a break, but our co-host Nora just got here.
Wild Nora has appeared.
Yeah. I wanted to make sure. Did you have anything you wanted to add about Prop 1 before we go to break?
Prop 1, Prop 2, or Prop 3?
Oh, yeah, we talked about all
I think the propositions in general, the fact that it'll pass is great, fantastic news. That really got people out to vote, and I agree that more should be done about voting rights. I would like to see us get ranked choice and get a holiday in the state, as well as protections from stuff like cross-check, like legal state voter registration purges. That is. Oh yeah, we
need to talk about that. We need to talk about that next, because Chris Kobach and what happened in Florida. Yeah, we need to talk about that. Mm-hmm. And also, breaking news, because this happened earlier in the day. Jeff Sessions.
Oh, we talk about everybody's favorite racist Keebler elf.
Oh my God! Here's the thing. Here's the problem with. I don't want people to celebrate, because here's the problem. Trump fired him because he recused himself. Mm-hmm. So firing.
So he's officially fired now.
Yes, he resigned. He resigned because Trump asked him to resign. Here's the problem with this. The person that they're putting into his position wants to shut down the Mueller investigation. Now, we may have different point of views when it comes to the Russia point of view, but that is obstruction of justice when he's directing the person who's under him to shut down the investigation of him.
Oh yeah, and just to clarify, even so, I've been very critical of Russiagate since the beginning, but I will give
I think
this.
all of us have.
Oh yeah. Nothing else. The Mueller investigation has been good at ferreting out a lot of the bread and potatoes corruption you would see from people in Trump's circle. So even if you are, completely fed up with the whole Russia story and stuff, I think the Mueller investigation is important, at least for that reason. Okay, but yeah, let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we're going to keep talking about the election. Some more local analysis, and talk about just how it played out at the national level as well.
Yeah, we gotta talk about. There's a couple things that we gotta talk about.
All right. Okay, so y'all listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. We'll be right back.
It may not be apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in the Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
This is George W. Bush, and you're listening to 89.1 WIDR, Kalamazoo, Michigan, Kalamazoo. You know what you're listening to, Kalamazoo, Michigan, man. What are you, stupid?
Before you came around, I was drowning in the depths of despair. And then when you finally came, it's funny you were unaware. But when you look in my eyes, I'm a rabbit in the headlights. And when you're touching my skin, I'm a river in the moonlight.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and I saw somebody is calling right now. I thank you for listening. I would say try calling back again during the next break.
One of us has got it.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about some local races here, and we were talking about. Well, actually, I'll put off talking about Matt until we got Lawrence here back with us. But one thing I wanted to that's going to be really important. I don't think it's really got enough attention. The county commission has flipped since last night.
Oh?
Yes, basically, where we had a 6-5 majority on the county commission before, we now have, I believe it's 7 now, 7-3. Oh,
hey.
Hold on. So, okay, who flipped? And let's talk a little bit about the dynamics of those races, because I think it's really important to focus in on that. So, all of the Democratic incumbents retained their seats, and then Dale Sugars was defeated by Christine Morse by roughly about 400 votes, 400 votes and some change. And then Scott McGraw was defeated by Meredith Place by about 1,000 votes. And, one of the really cool things about this, and, I think a lot of people are paying too much attention, Meredith in particular, I really want to give her a special shout out because her territory is mostly a lot of Portage. an area that has been very reliably Republican for a very long time. So to take Scott McGraw's seat took a hell of a lot of footwork, organizing, and I was seeing her out there campaigning like every day. It's like what is it? AOC says, put in the legwork and you can flip a district, and she did that quite handily too. Like I said, she won by a 1,000 vote margin. So
shout out to the other Justice Democrats that won. We have 2 women who are Native American. Who will be in our body politics. We have 2 women who are Muslim. One of them from the state of Michigan.
Rashida Detroit,
out of the D.
Yep.
And she's also a Justice Democrat, and she
Palestinian DSA member.
Yes,
oh, no.
not taking any corporate PAC money, not taking any super PAC money. She will be in that thing representing. We elected more women to Congress in this election than any other time in America. Now, let's also be clear: there was some horrible defeats. The Senate got wiped, and I would like to tell all the Democrats who are listening, what did we learn? We learned that when you run moderate Republicans in the Democratic Party, they get beat by real Republicans.
Yeah, I think probably the most high-profile example of this was Joe Donnelly down in Indiana.
McCaskill, who started basically spitting on her own base by saying that she's not for far-right candidates. She's at first she was saying that she wanted progressive voters to help her out, and then Claire McCaskill saying that she wanted progressive voters to turn out and to help her, and then she started courting Republican voters by saying that she supports Trump. So
And I mean, I'll tell you, I watched one of Donnelly's ads last night because I was trying to think. It's like, man, he got whooped for an incumbent. Like, he got whooped pretty bad.
He was supposed to win by 1. He got beat by 14.
Yeah,
that's a 15-point swing.
And so I watched one of his commercials, and after watching it, I'm like, that was a really good Republican ad. Because he literally talks about I am against the far left who want to abolish ICE and we need secure borders.
No, he's like, I'm against socialism.
I'm against socialism.
I'm against Medicare. Let me remind these same Democrats, what did we learn? The number one issues that people voted for was getting money out of politics, ending things like gerrymandering, which is basically legalized corruption, and also health care.
Yeah.
Medicare.
Yeah. And
just for a quick second. Medicare for all polls at 70% approval by Americans. 52% of Republicans support Medicare for all. Yet you have numbnuts running away from it.
I think this brings up a bigger point to me, and I feel like a lot of people talk about this midterm was a referendum on Trump, or it was a referendum on the Democratic Party. You know what I really think? I think this was this midterm was a referendum on the hashtag resistance and its style of politics, which is oppose Trump, vote blue no matter who. And don't bring up something to actually oppose Trump's agenda. Good social policies, progressive policies. Just get somebody in there who's less bad. Try to really invoke a lot of kind of tribalism to the benefit of the Democratic Party. And what we saw play out, and it's everybody's a lot of the people I know are the Democrats took back the House. Just barely. They just barely did that. It reminds me of how Doug Jones just barely took a Senate seat from a child molester. We had about 30. I think we added 36 seats. We needed 25. Yeah.
So we have 36 now. If my math is right.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're not sitting comfortably because we only run the House. But at the same time, when you run candidates that are pushing policies that your base does not support, or then you're not going to have people come out and vote for you. The people who called Andrew Gillum voted for a person who called him a monkey. Mm-hmm. You're not gonna get those people to vote for you.
No.
But you will get what you will get is people who already want to turn out for you. The biggest voting bloc in the Democratic Party is black women. Mm-hmm. It's the black women and minorities. Those are the biggest voting blocks for the Democratic Party. What do? You turn out those people to vote.
Yeah, and it's sickening to see time and time again. You know, as long as like the capitalist corporate wing of the Democrats in charge, their consultants just say again and again, go find these moderate Republicans that will flip towards you. It's like they're just chasing this unicorn all the time without actually. Here's what you do. Here's why Republicans, besides all the voter suppression, gerrymandering and stuff, but they're able to get their base out to reliably vote because they respect their base and they play to their base and they act upon their base's demands. Centrist Democrats spit on their base, kick them in the teeth, tell them that their ideas and wants are foolish. Example, the Senate race down in Indiana. As long as they do that, it's going to maintain this kind of this holding pattern. The right wing of American politics, the Republican Party, and then, the other right wing, the Democrats, but the Republicans are quickly morphing into this far-right, pseudo-white nationalist party.
Pseudo?
Well, yeah, it's kind of like that thing with the Proud Boys. Like, see, we got a couple of not white people here.
Steve King won. Steve King is straight up neo-Nazi.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Dog. It's not pseudo anything. These people are straight up saying, "Hey, I'm a Nazi. I love it.
Yeah.
Don't you like it?" Like that's what they're doing now. And it's like, nah, dog, we don't. Nah, dog, get that out of here.
But yeah, the response of the Democrats, like they do not have an equilateral response at all. Even like what Nancy Pelosi was talking about after they won the House, talking about bipartisanship, and it's like, this is not the 90s, Nancy.
Oh no. Nancy said, and I'm quoting her, that she should be Speaker of the House because she is a great fundraiser. Yeah. Let me remind you again, Democratic Party, when you take money from multinational corporations, and those same multinational corporations is giving money to the Republican Party at a higher rate, that means that you're just a corporate tool that's cheaper. And that also means that you're going to do their bidding for cheaper, selling out your base.
And, I want to...
Whether that's cheaper or not really depends on a number of factors, but like... I wouldn't really call this a blue wave election in the first place.
It's more like a purple cluster bug.
No. It was a blue wave in the house. It was a blue wave in the House, but it was definitely a red wall in the Senate.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Go ahead,
well,
Nora.
From like the beginning, following some of the statistics leading up to this, we knew that that Dems would gain control of the House and like lose control of the Senate. Like this isn't like terribly surprising what happened, but like. Right now, the New York Times live election results, probably the best way to like get the hard numbers on what happened, shows only a 27-seat gain for the Dems, like only putting them at about like nine congressional seats in a majority. Like they're still guaranteed to have it, but like that's not very much, and that's enough for horrible bipartisan quote unquote Dems who got elected to just flip whatever they want and allow these horrible policies to pass. Now, people are, really, it is still like a check on some level of Trump's power, but like not enough governorships and other state level positions like flipped enough to really protect from these policies in a way that could be really constructive. Like even in some of these states where the Senate Dems were able to like hold on, they still had Republican governors win, like in Ohio, for example, in like most of the Northeast, which despite voting blue consistently, like just keep on voting for Republican governors, which baffles me.
Because they're tricked. These moderate Republicans. There are no moderate Republicans. If you're voting for Trump 90% of the time or more, then you're not a moderate Republican. Not at all. And the problem that you have is you have Democrats who do not make their case. How many ads did we see them fighting hard for Medicare for all, free college, ending the wars, a New Deal, or fighting to get money out of politics? A lot of those same Democrats that lost. I mean, there was a lot of Democrats that did win governor seats. So we do need to give praise. I forgot the lady's name. There was a black lady who won. I can't even think of her name.
You're not. This isn't Stacey Abrams.
No, I'm not talking about Stacey Abrams. I was talking about somebody else. But we did win a good number of governorships. The problem that we have is we have an establishment party that listens to consultants, and their consultants are telling them to do things that are counteractive to their base. Yeah. What we saw is when you bring out people who already support you and you get those people to bring out people who would support you, you win. Mm-hmm. Trump doubles down to his base's wants and needs, even though what they may want or need are horrible policies. The Democrats do not do that.
Well, there's like counter argument to, I guess, this, like specifically talking about the Northeast. Like we had two Justice Democrats running in the Northeast, one in Maryland, Ben Jealous, one in Vermont, Christine Holoquist. In Vermont, she would have been the country's first openly transgender governor, and both of them lost to the Republicans when the Democrats in each of those races, like very easily won the rest of their statewide races. Like there really shouldn't be an excuse for why this happens. I don't know why this is like a cultural or electoral phenomenon in the Northeast specifically, but which I'm still trying to wrap my head around. I know they're
have
tricked.
Our first openly gay governor.
Oh yeah,
and that's also historical. I mean, like we're not. Progress comes slowly at first and then all at once. That's always been my motto. That's been my motto when it comes to working out. That's my motto. That's not a motto that I took from a wise black man that told me that it's just like an avalanche. It's going to be slow at first, and then as soon as enough rocks move, that avalanche is coming. This is a setup for 2020, and this is why it makes me upset when I saw a lot of national articles. One, weaponizing age against Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and also Joe Biden, and then pushing people like Kamala Harris, Kirsten Gillibrand, and Cory Booker, when Kirsten Gillibrand has said that she's not running. Mm-hmm. Yep. This is a setup for 2020, and yes, this is. Does this also mean that there's going to be also some other horrible policies, like maybe Trump seating another justice on the Supreme Court? Probably. They were already pushing his court justices through because Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi wanted to go back and raise money. Yep. So 1 out of 7 judges that's been appointed is appointed by Trump. And the reason why is because the Democrats did not choose to fight because they wanted to go and raise money. Think about that.
A lot of their vulnerable Senate races, they lost anyway.
No, but that's my point. The same judges that they're going to end up fighting against because of their rulings are the same ones that they chose to not fight now because they were more concerned about getting corporate cash and raising money for their primaries. We have another 2 years. A lot of these people are going to get primaried again. And there was a lot of Justice Democrats, Brand New Congress, Our Revolution, and Democratic Socialist candidates, and some Green Party candidates who also won too. So
wait, where? Like I looked all over the map and I couldn't find them winning. Like
there was
like anywhere.
Let me pull it up.
Well, okay, so there was a progressive independent in Vermont who won lieutenant governor, but like there wasn't even a Democrat in that race. And like in Canova versus Wasserman Schultz, like, you know, Schultz took it. It wasn't even close. Like none of the Green Party people for Congress made it in California, even when they didn't have a Republican on that ballot. Like, this is why people don't believe in third parties. People.
No. Here's the thing. A lot of the big name people that we follow, a lot of those big name people lost. Like there's no denying that. Mm-hmm. But you also had other people who are uncorrupt, and also people who are progressives that did win. A lot of them we already knew were going to win. AOC we already knew was going to win. We knew Bernie Sanders was already going to win. We knew Elizabeth Warren was already going to win. Keith Ellison and others. But there was a lot of historical firsts that did happen in this election. So as bad as it was, as big of a wave as it should have been, it wasn't. But it was progress moving it was progress moving forward.
Yeah, and you know, like what I have to say about that too is, you know, kind of speaking of something I was bringing up earlier, is given the current strategies and state of the Democratic Party, I really feel like, you know, this slight edge in the House, this losing Senate seats, this should be proof positive. Like this is the extent to which this kind of centrist neoliberal politics, this is all it can give us anymore. 20-something seats against the most inflammatory, authoritarian president we have ever had. I don't know. There are a lot of racist. Andrew Jackson comes to mind, but in modern times, and this is all that they could do. And you know, I mean, let's not be naive here. It's not necessarily that they're stupid. They are, but they're kind of bribed to be deliberately ignorant. And what I mean by that, it's like, you know, look, all the mainstream news channels were saying, we did these polls, the number one issue in this election was healthcare. If they wanted that blue wave, here's what you'd have to do. Medicare for all. They would have cleaned house. They would have, they get a House, probably would have gotten the Senate. But as we know, too many Democrats, too many people who are part of the Democratic machinery have their hands firmly in the pockets of big healthcare, big pharma, including our own governor, governor-elect, I guess.
We have to, and that actually brings me to Andrew Gillum, and I love Andrew Gillum. I love Stacey Abrams. There's a lot that I need to say about Stacey Abrams, especially about that race. But Andrew Gillum, how do he snatched victory from he snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. You were fourth in the primary, and then you started running as a strong progressive in the state of Florida. Now, Florida is a red state. It's not purple. Florida is a red state. But Bernie Sanders endorsed you. You ran as a populist progressive. After the primary, you start stumping with Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Hillary Clinton and Bloomberg. Those are the people that you have stomping for you. Like Hillary Clinton's poll ratings in Florida is 36%.
Yeah,
she's less popular there than Trump. She lost the state to Trump. Debbie Wasserman Schultz cheated Bernie Sanders, the person who endorsed you. You talk about criminal justice reform, and you're hanging around Bloomberg. Bloomberg did stop and frisk.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you doing? Like, that's not how you fight. Now, don't get me wrong. I liked the way that he was fighting, and that's bad politics in when it comes to the optics. But when he started moving away from Medicare for all and he started saying affordable health care, that was what he was doing. He started to backpedal on saying that he wasn't fighting for Medicare for all. He wanted to have affordable health care. And I'm like, dog, if you started running as a progressive and you was moving as a progressive, then you need to keep that same energy during the general. You didn't. Now, go ahead.
So, I I think that was probably the main reason why DeSantis did end up winning in Florida. But let's not kid ourselves that there was certainly voter suppression in play here, just like there was in Georgia, just like there was in North Dakota, just like there was in Kansas. Certainly not to the extent that it was in Georgia.
No. There was mad voter suppression in Florida and also in Georgia. We do need to talk about that.
I don't know up to this point. Has Stacey Abrams, is she still not...
Yes, she is actually going to call for a recount, and Greg Palast is actually suing Brian Kemp. So there is a chance that she could still pull it off. That said, the race between Bill Nelson and Rick Scott in Florida for U.S. Senate did end up going to the Republicans as well. However, this was in less than 0.5% margin, which triggers an automatic recount in this state for this race at least. Now, I'm not sure if that'll also happen with the Gillum DeSantis race, because with 99% of precincts reporting, it's at 0.6%. So if Gillum can gain 0.1% between now and when they count the rest of the 1% of the precincts, then it's possible he could eke out a recount. But this is not something that discussion we should have to be having in the first place. He should have just won outright.
Yeah.
The other thing with Stacey Abrams is a bunch of provisional ballots, over 53,000 of them were not counted. Mm-hmm. And also, let's keep it real. There's a lot of independent media like the Young Turks, Secular Talk, the Humanist Report, Jimmy Dore Show, Majority Report. They cover the primaries extensively, talking about a bunch of these different candidates. There's a lot of media that didn't want these candidates to win.
That's right.
A lot of them didn't. A lot of them wasn't supporting these candidates because change would overturn their apple cart.
And kind of draw things back to Michigan. The closest race at the state level was Dana Nessel. That was a real nail biter. We did not. Leonard didn't concede until the following morning. I think it was a difference of only about 2 or 3 points. Am I right, Nora?
Something like that. I mean, I don't know if it's even still technically been called because I haven't seen anything on the New York Times about it. But I'm gonna check.
It's sad that we have to go to the New York Times about
exactly.
the
So it looks. I mean,
come on, M Live.
It looks like there's no chance. Leonard did concede. They're still counting, and it still definitely looks like she's won this. Yeah. So thankful. Yeah, it was really close. We've talked about this before in the show. It's because Leonard bought a huge bad word load of ads to attack her with, and she's not taking corporate money.
Dangerous Dana Nessel.
So
you saw that ad?
Yeah. And I did want to just make a fine point on that. So why I brought up Dana is she was the progressive choice. She was the one all of the insurgent progressives stumped for at the convention. She got the nomination because of grassroots organizers. But when push came to shove and she got dogpiled with these Republican attack ads, she went from an 8-point lead to this very narrow margin. Did the MDP come to her rescue?
Nope.
You saw Gretchen ads constantly, 24/7. I didn't see anything from Dana until about a week out from the election, and that's because bless her for relying mostly on grassroots donations, but one. A attorney general race usually isn't going to get the same kind of financial backing or attention as a gubernatorial. And, the state party has a responsibility to help out their candidates, especially when they come off, from such heavy assault of slander like Dana did. And I think that's why it ended up being so close. Because there was this tenuous relationship with her and the state party that really didn't want an AG pick in there that was so outspoken about taking on corporations and things like that. Go ahead, Nora.
So I think mostly because of I'll say this because of Dana and all 3 propositions getting through that, and I guess the other statewide candidates too, that things are gonna start sucking a lot less in Michigan. Maybe it'll be gradual, but I think that we're in a lot better hands than we were previously. I think that she will succeed in getting Line 5 shut down. I think she will succeed on getting Elliot Larson amended for LGBT rights. I think she will succeed on getting sentences forgiven for nonviolent marijuana convicts. Of course, she has to be pushed like anybody else, but she didn't take corporate money, and she's, really committed to fight like no one I've seen. Also worth mentioning in Michigan that the GOP's majority in both legislatures has decreased a lot. Like, they still have it, but it's a lot less than it was previously. And once Prop 2 and 3 go to effect, it's not going to last for very much longer. And I think the only statewide races that we didn't win were for Supreme Court. The incumbents won in both of those. We still have a majority Snyder Court, and I'm concerned about that and how that's going to affect things in the state moving forward, because they were okay with not punishing the people who did the Flint crisis.
What I want Dan Nessel to do is please bring up charges on former Governor Rick Snyder, because he lied twice about knowing about Flint, about the memo about poisoning Flint, Michigan. Because maybe I'm still upset and passionate. I know we're all mad about it, and maybe it's because I have friends that are personally affected by it. I have family that was personally affected by it. Since Rick Snyder lied twice in court about not knowing about...
which is a felony, by the way.
Yeah, which is a felony. I need Dana to not pull a Barack Obama and say that we don't prosecute crimes in the past. We move forward. I'm like, nah, Dana.
No.
Nah, yeah. Dana. That brother and his party who poisoned a city need to go to jail. They need to go to jail. But I trust Dana. I think she's cool. But also, Andy, it goes back to what you're talking about. Who's going to affect the Democratic Party's donors? Dana would. So Dana's not going to get the support of the party, because the party's not, because the majority of the party is not there to push. They're supposed to be there to push the policy of the people, but their business is to get Democrats elected. That's their job. And if they push our policies, that's good. If they take the donor money, that affects them better. So it depends on what affects their donors. Dana would affect their donors if she pushes for the policies that she said that she's pushing for. But this also goes back to. But I wanted to transition back. I want to talk about Stacey Abrams. I love Stacey Abrams, and I hope that lawsuit goes through, because what Kemp did is, when it comes to voter suppression, when it comes to corruption, though it's not illegal what he was doing, it's unethical, and it should be illegal. That race needs to get a recount. I'm pretty sure Andrew Gillum's going to end up getting a recount.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah,
0.1%.
Florida's pretty weird.
Here's the thing. I want Florida to have a recount, but the Supreme Court could always be like, hey, we don't care about states' rights like they did against Bush v. Gore.
Yeah.
So
I think the headline's gonna read Florida man gets to recount on 0.1% of
but yeah, dog. This is the issue. This is the thing that I wanted to talk about. Since the Democrats have a majority in the House, what should their attack plan be, since they control the House now? Now, I know a lot of people are saying that they want to subpoena Trump's tax returns. Personally, I don't mind that level of pettiness, because showing the fact that since there's been stories come out saying that his family has committed fraud for decades, and that's how they made their money by not paying their taxes, which is a federal crime. I would love to see how the Trump family have been dodging their taxes. because they definitely were going to put Wesley Snipes in jail.
Yeah.
I would love to see how that happens with our president.
You see, they bring up a really interesting point, which is like, okay, now that they got a majority in the House, what are they gonna do with it? So we talked a little bit. We referenced what Nancy Pelosi said, where she's kind of. It sounded like she's trying to reel back. It's like, we want to be bipartisan. We want to work together, reach across the aisle, and there's a couple of things to unpack from that. One, if you're running on this whole resistance platform, you promised your constituents you were going to get in there and resist. It's another. To me, it speaks of like a long line of broken promises to constituents. If that's like how they're going to follow through on this, is not actually like being an aggressive check on the administration. And also, what's interesting to me is. So, Trump made that veiled threat on Twitter. It's like, well, if you investigate me, I'll investigate you right back. And to a certain extent, I do wonder, because, Democrats, not all their hands are clean either. There's that old adage. Was it Jimmy Carter or Eisenhower said, like, if you get rich, there's no way to get rich in politics unless you are corrupt, and there are a lot of rich people in the Democratic Party.
That is not the truth.
Yeah, so it is actually a legit thing to wonder. It's kind of like the same reason that a lot of Democrats don't call out voter suppression, because again, it's like, well, their hands aren't really clean either.
Let's be clear.
Yeah.
During the primaries, especially in places like New York, there's massive voter suppression because the primaries are catered toward the establishment incumbent. Mm-hmm. That is what it is, especially in New York. So discrimination and bigotry plagues both parties. Here's the problem. One party does it worse because one party does it out in the open, and they dare you to say, what are you going to do about it? The other party actually agrees with us agrees with people like us, progressives, black people, people who are in the LGBT community, half the time when it comes to social issues. But when it comes to economic issues, that's where you have the problem. It reminds me of the quote from Martin Luther King. It didn't take one dime for them to stop segregating buses. It didn't cost America one dime to stop separating lunch counters. But when it comes to the redistribution of wealth from the people to the elites, now all hell's gonna break loose.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they hated on him for that poor people's march. Never forget that.
Oh man, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
They killed the man after he was anti-war after his Vietnam. After he was anti-war. So I mean, like, come on, dog. Like it's amazing to me in our day and age. A lot of the issues that Martin Luther King talks about, which is still part of the problem. He said in his letter from Birmingham jail, the biggest problem is not the outright racist. The biggest problem is not the clerk who won't do their job. I'm paraphrasing. The problem is the moderate Democrat who wants to dictate to you when your freedom should be. Who says I agree with your policy but not your methods. I agree with your ideology, but I can't support you now.
Yep.
That's the problem.
So we were talking about voter suppression earlier and how are we going to push back against that? Well, there's some good news, like not only in our state. We had Maryland and Nevada passed automatic and/or election day registration.
Yeah.
Salute.
Florida passed an initiative to restore voting rights to 1.4 million former felons.
That is a huge deal.
Yeah, that's
everybody.
a huge deal.
So that's going to start turning things around in Florida, even though I'm still very worried about, what's going to go on in that state in general.
But 2020?
Yeah, Colorado and Missouri also cracked down on gerrymandering as well as our own state.
Hey.
So these are all great news.
North Dakota about lobbyists. People who get out of public service cannot be lobbyists and lobbyist contributions.
Well, that's good to hear. Glad to hear.
It's about the they took a stance on money in politics.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Because people don't like the corruption.
Yeah, North Dakota is a weird state too, because I haven't spent some time there a couple years ago. Granted, I spent most of my time over at the camp, but one of the interesting things to me about North Dakota is they're one of the few states with a state bank. Yeah, they're also really conservative, and they had a conservative Democrat as their rep, Heidi Heitkamp.
Well, not anymore.
Not anymore.
Because she sucked and she got her face beat in.
Yeah, because I feel two ways about it, because I know there's some voter suppression, particularly against Native people, that might have played a part of it, but she was also a really bad rep.
She's pro-Dapple in the first place.
Pro-Dapple,
would they have voted for
Trump at points.
Let me.
Pro-Neil Gorsuch.
For those who do not know what we're talking about, they were trying to tell Native Americans that if you have a P.O. box, you are not allowed to get an ID or a voter ID. Why would this affect? Why do you? For some people, y'all might thinking, if they have a P.O. box, well, whatever. That doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. Problem is that a lot of people who are on the reservations, or people who are Native Americans, they have P.O. boxes because a lot of the reservations don't have streets, or they don't have street addresses and stuff. So they have P.O. boxes. That's the same type of discrimination that when you hear conservatives when they say, "Hey, we need to have voter ID cards for Americans." Forgetting the fact that 25% of black Americans don't have cars or don't have state IDs.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
They don't have state IDs because they live in very heavily populated areas and they take public transportation. Why do you think in states like Texas and in Georgia they moved the early voting polls away from places that public transportation can get to, people have to walk miles to get there? Come on, man. I'm tired. The thing that makes me upset is that there are certain people in our political spectrum who are upset because they are now seeing the problems that black people and other people that's been minorities have been talking about for years, because now it's finally affecting them.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because I'm thinking really want to give kudos to Stacey Abrams for making voting rights such a corner point of her campaign, because this is something that we've been talking about on the show almost nonstop for about 2 years now, and we've always felt like we were just kind of shouting in the woods, nobody's paying attention to this, man, nobody's talking about voter suppression, and then she's out there calling Kemp out on it, national TV, and even now, it's almost like a taboo with Democrats. You don't question the validity of an election outcome, and she's out there right now being no, I want to make sure all the votes are counted before I concede. So, yeah, real props to her for bringing it into the national conversation. I actually saw pieces on mainstream media leading up to this election talking about voter suppression. Did not see anything like that in 2016. So that is a positive development. People are at least noticing this problem in the mainstream.
So we spent most of the show talking about why the midterms went the way they did, but there's still, I feel like there's a bunch of important things about what happened in the midterms. Now, I took all these notes. Is it all right if I read through a bunch of them?
Please
okay,
do,
so
yeah.
Just to recap real quick, Michigan, Dems win all statewide races except for Supreme Court, and narrow the majority in the state legislature for Republicans. Props 1 through 3 win here, and Democrats also won 7 out of 14 congressional seats.
Yep, that's true. Yep.
Florida, the GOP wins statewide again, but it's likely to go to a recount in both. Wasserman Schultz beats Canova, not even close.
It really wasn't. And I think a lot of people had they had elevated expectations for that race. And
here's the problem about that race. You have someone who is known for cheating still being allowed to be in the Democratic Party circles.
Yeah.
That's the problem that we're having. It's the same thing with Donna Brazile, man. As much as I love Donna Brazile for writing the book that she wrote, it says a lot about the Democratic Party It says a lot about the Democratic Party that CNN has more integrity than they do. Because when CNN found out that down in Brazil was cheating and giving Hillary Clinton questions for the debate, they fired her.
Yeah.
What did the DNC do? They hired her to be on the Rules and Bylaws Committee. Right.
So back to the recap. Felons regained the right to vote in Florida. Lobbying power is also weakened in Florida, and offshore drilling is banned.
Oh, dude, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Good.
In
Yeah.
Georgia,
Good win.
of course, governor's race will go to a recount thanks to Stacey Abrams actually fighting and Greg Palast threatening this lawsuit.
Yes.
Handel loses CD6 by 200 votes, which, if you remember, that was a John Ossoff race.
Oh, that's
the
right.
most expensive congressional race in history. You have a quick comment?
Oh. Down went Scott Walker.
Down went Scott Walker.
Scott Walker. Let's not
I'm
forget.
really happy about that.
Let's not forget there are some troglodytes that are no longer that will no longer be in Congress. Scott Walker's one of them.
He was a governor.
Yeah, Scott
governor,
Walker's
yeah.
one of them. There was another one that was I can't think of the other dude.
The other Republican still took Paul Ryan's district. Randy G. Bryce lost in Wisconsin.
That's disappointing.
But Tammy Baldwin stayed despite tremendous amount of money being spent against her, and she's still the only openly LGBT Democrat in the Senate. She's still a corporatist, but I'll respect her on some level for that. And in Ohio, Dems keep the U.S. Senate but lose the other statewide races despite massive attacks on reproductive rights. On a similar note, in West Virginia, Joe Manchin is reelected, and a ballot initiative that would make abortion illegal passes in West Virginia. Alabama passed something very similar, designed, of course, to challenge Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
In California, Dianne Feinstein and Anthony Rendon win, unfortunately, against their other Democratic challengers.
Gavin Newsom did win. Now, I do have some problems with Gavin Newsom, but you know.
Who did he run against again?
I forgot who he ran against.
Okay, so Gavin Newsom won, yay, but
I mean, he's a bit of a progressive, but he does have corporatist leanings. So when it comes to the progressive scale in our body politics, he's under Keith Ellison. So if Keith Ellison is like the fifth most progressive person in our body politics, he's definitely number 6.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, he's still in that top 10.
Yeah.
But he's number 6. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Something else that's really disappointing that happened in California, all the Green Party candidates that could have won didn't. The initiative for rent control lost.
That was really
that's going to be
unfortunate.
really awful for the people that live there. But homeless mental health increase did also win. So hey, when they get kicked out of the street, they'll have better mental health.
I saw somebody post a tweet about that. They had 2 ballot initiatives side by side in California, and this is peak California liberalism when the rent control ballot initiative fails, but the one for making sure farm animals have enough room that won by a double-digit margins. So no housing for people, but make sure we have housing for the farm. I mean, that is important. Not to be blasé about it, but
I mean, animals are innocent, man.
Yeah.
Animals are innocent. Okay. So in Colorado, the anti-gerrymandering proposal won. The anti-fracking proposal lost. But there was a horrible pro-fossil fuel proposal that did not make it. That would have really messed up the state's constitution in a way that I don't really want to delve into the details right now. But Colorado, thanks to electing the first openly gay governor, became a new Democratic trifecta, along with Illinois this year. So
Illinois is going to be a sanctuary. Is officially a sanctuary state.
I thought that already was passed earlier.
No, I thought that was one of the things that Illinois was fighting for. Yeah. Let me.
There wasn't any ballot initiatives. I checked, and it was passed earlier. So
never mind.
All right, don't worry about it.
Still a good thing.
It's still a good thing.
In Kansas, Chris Kobach's gone.
That was the other troglodyte I was thinking of.
That filled my vengeful heart with joy.
Oh my
that
God.
made me so happy to see.
For those who do not understand why Chris Kobach is such a horrible. Okay. Horrible. No, he's garbage. Okay, he is garbage. Hot garbage.
Trash.
Okay. Here's the thing, Chris Kobach. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But Chris Kobach was one of the people who was who orchestrated, or
he was the guy, the maestro, if you will.
He was the maestro of crosscheck.
Mm-hmm.
So, for those who not understand what crosscheck was, it was the thing that the guy in Georgia was using to knock off people off the voting rolls.
Mm-hmm.
It's what knocked off hundreds of thousands to millions of people during 2016. What it was
77,000 right here in Michigan.
Yeah. So what it was saying that people who have very similar names, and a majority of people who have very similar names in America are people of color, Latinos, blacks, Asians. A lot of people have a very similar name if you're a person of color. So their idea was, if you have a similar name to someone else who lives in a city near you, or crossing district lines, they can knock you off the voter rolls because you may be impersonating that person, or you are a fraud.
You're trying to vote twice.
Yeah, you're trying to vote twice, and you're trying to commit voter fraud. Yeah. Here's the problem with that. There's been around 1,000 cases of voter fraud. It is true. If you go back to 1934, 1934, between 1934 and 2028, there's been about 1,000 cases of voter fraud. How many votes has there been since 1934?
just to I put a fine point in it. We talk about voter suppression a lot, and if you go by the hard numbers, it's a thing that actually happens as opposed to voter fraud. So the people aren't really placing these fake votes because they can't get away with it. They get caught easily. But when the government themselves do it, of course they get away for it because they're the government. They're the in bed with the establishment and all this other stuff.
Here's the problem: you are more likely to find someone in America who actually commits voter fraud, who's actually prosecuted and convicted of voter fraud. You are more likely to get struck by lightning twice.
Literally,
literally, you are more likely to be struck by lightning twice than to find someone who has actually committed voter fraud.
It's interesting how many things that people that have been fear-mongered about are less likely to happen than getting struck by lightning, but I digress.
Right.
Yeah. So, going back to troglodytes getting kicked out of office. So,
I like this one.
In Kentucky, this, I don't know if y'all remember Kim Davis, county
yes.
clerk. She's infamous for refusing to hand out same-sex marriage license after 2015. She got voted out by one of the first people she denied licenses to.
Yeah, it's just poetry, man. Poetic justice.
Poetic justice. Poetic justice.
Yeah. Make a song with that one.
There's already a song called Poetic Justice. That's the thing. That's the reason why I was singing it. It's Poetic Justice. Here's the thing. I remember arguing about that conversation, and I'm like, look, if we are gonna make that the new standard, so as a Christian, I'm actually not supposed to be eating pork. So if I was to work at a grocery store and someone was to hand me some bacon, I'd be like, I can't ring you out for this because of my religion. That is okay because of Kim Davis, what she did in Kentucky. But since she's gone. Since she is gone, that's good. But I also want to go back to Chris Kobach, because he was in Kansas. I love how Republicans always want to bring up Chicago and Detroit and Baltimore when they talk about Democrats controlling areas, and how those places are disenfranchised or poverty stricken. Kansas is a perfect example of what happens when you let Republicans run the state. That was the experiment that Republicans ran that state. They put in every Republican policy that you could think of, and Kansas is hurting for it. They are bankrupt. Their schools don't. The schools only the schools are only open for 4 days. The teachers have to take 2 or 3 jobs because they aren't being paid a living wage.
There's a great book by Thomas. I can't remember his last name, but it's called like What's the
Matter with Kansas?
Yeah.
That was by Thomas Frank. He also wrote Listen Liberal.
Yeah.
Listen Liberal is a good book too.
So I think the big reason why a lot of this stuff, like while a lot of the specifically horrible, right wing stuff is happening in Kansas, is because like the Kochs are from there. Like that's where to draw more connections. That's where Mike Pompeo is from, and he took more Koch money than any other congressman. He's now our Secretary of State.
Kansas is basically a hellmouth.
No. But so did Scott Walker. Scott Walker took a bunch of money from the Koch brothers, and that Koch brother money did not help him. He is gone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So again, the North remember. So a Game of Thrones reference. The North remembers, and this is only the beginning. This is only the beginning for going into 2020.
Oh yeah. So, kind of following that, I know we got some best of times. Give us some worst of times, Nora. This next update.
Okay. So in Iowa, as we mentioned before, this like really openly fascist congressman, Steve King, won his re-election.
Even more terrifying than the author, really.
Yeah. But interestingly enough, like Dems were able to flip most of the other congressional seats in the state. Like they couldn't get that guy. I don't know. I mean, I guess
here's the problem. He, because of his district, and I looked up his district. His district is very red because of how it's drawn. Mm-hmm. So we have to. So if you're running in that district, you have to start pushing and advocating for things that a lot of those voters are going to agree with. A lot of those voters are going to agree on Medicare for all, free college, and a living wage. They want to increase taxes more on the rich, not less. So I mean, you push for fighting corruption. That's how you beat Steve King. But Steve King is a troglodyte. Not gonna lie. And when he loses, and when Ted Cruz loses,
oof. Yeah, and I actually, real quick before I go back to you, Nora, I wanted to point out that there is a link between kind of extreme right candidates and gerrymandering. And, the very simple concept of it is that when you gerrymander districts and you get to pick your own voters, the people who have to run in those districts basically only, they run farther to the right in order to incite their base. It's what allows for extremists like Steve King to get into Congress. I mean, that's one of the really kind of important reasons to try to take down gerrymandering that I think a lot of people don't talk about. Like, not only does it make districts more fair, but you create a playing field where you do not have these very extreme candidates running for office that do not actually represent the views of most Americans or even most people in their district.
Yeah, seriously. That really does put a fine point in it, and why it's such great news that, gerrymandering is getting beat in some of these states. In this crazy socialist state of Utah.
Utah.
They got the polls are still counting, but it looks like Medicaid expansion, anti-gerrymandering, and medical marijuana are expected to win. Mm-hmm. So
I need to explain that real quick because I got to dip out. But the Mormon Church was fighting so hard against legalizing it. The Mormon Church doesn't even like their members to drink beer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they were fighting very hard against that. And the fact that the state was like, nah, son. Nah, son, we good. Try to tell you, man.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very similar thing happened in Missouri. The minimum wage increase won, and so did anti-gerrymandering and medical marijuana there. But of course, McCaskill lost her Senate seat because she sucks.
Yep.
So that's the short version of that. In Nevada, they passed auto voter registration. That was probably the one state so far that we know of where Democrats actually flipped a U.S. Senate seat blue. So good for them on that. They got one. Congrats.
Yeah.
And in Maryland, they passed a same-day voter registration, but Ben Jealous lost, despite actually being a progressive and running on these sort of really key issues.
Do you remember what the margin was with Ben? I didn't get a chance to look that race up.
With most of these Northeast states, they still elected Republican governors without even having it be that close. Like that's probably the thing that frustrated me the most about this election, other than like the obvious stuff. It's oh my gosh, I don't really have words. I can't wrap my head around why exactly it happens.
Yeah, I mean, because it's a little easier to explain. Like a lot, the reason so many of the Democratic incumbents were vulnerable is one, that whole populist anger hasn't died since 2016.
Oh no,
it's really only gotten more intense, both on the left and the right. So if you're like a corporate, like centrist friendly Democratic incumbent, you're going to have a bad time. Even Debbie Stabenow.
Oh, no, these are in the Northeast, the ones I'm referring to, except for...
I know those are progressives, but, even Debbie Stabenow here is like more in the center. It was a very close race with John James. I don't think she was expecting that. But yeah, it is a little harder to explain. Why are these candidates having problems in these otherwise fairly like kind of liberal left-leaning states with claiming governorships? Is it like a cultural thing? It is weird. Like they do have a history of like, these otherwise blue states electing Republican governors.
Yeah, I think that it's pretty consistent across states that they're more likely to, at least slightly more likely to elect Democratic senators and Republican governors than vice versa. Of course, like if a state's deeply red or blue, it's not going to make that much of a difference. Like, and these are, in these cases, these were all like incumbents like winning re-election. So there's also the the incumbency effect in play there. Money raising, I guess. Like, recapping Vermont as an example, Bernie won by huge landslide. Progressive Independent wins lieutenant governors. Dems didn't run in either of those specific race, but they will not be electing the first openly transgender governor. Like, neither of them could come out and help Christine like try to win Vermont. Like that really bothers me. Like, and they won all the other statewide races like handily. I take issue with that. Well, those are the notes. Those are the extensive notes I have on what seemed important coming out of this race, and I'm sure there's more. Like some results we're still waiting on the West Coast, but yeah, there was a lot that happened, and take a moment to unpack. Take care of yourselves, people listening at home. Election night is stressful, no matter who or where you are. I was up until. Well, certainly later than I normally go to bed, and wondering, will I still have rights in a couple of years? Will I have to flee the country? I mean, the answer is still maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man.
One more thing. That Massachusetts did also strike down a ballot initiative to try to take away trans rights. So that's good on Massachusetts.
Yeah. Good going, Massachusetts. Though again, like it's weird. Like you see states like Florida who like they'll elect like a kind of reactionary racist guy for governor, and then be like, what? Let's make sure that convicts have the right to vote. So, I mean, I think the American electorate is a lot more complex than people really give credit for. I mean, there are a lot of conservatives I know here in the state of Michigan who were totally down for legalization. So. Yeah, I think that's another important lesson that you can't put voters in a box. The reasons people vote the way they do are usually very complex and intertwined with both economic and kind of cultural concerns, fears, resentments, etc. I did want to spend some time, so I shot this article off to you guys, and this is something that's I've seen floating around. One of the interesting things about this election. For a lot of my anti-fascist comrades, whether you're more anarchist or more communistic, I saw a lot of radical people who don't typically vote engage with the electoral politics, and it's been kind of under the umbrella of quote-unquote harm reduction. And I've seen, that be kind of critiqued and criticized in its own right. Is that just another way to say the lesser evil? And I think, even on this show, tonight's episode, we've mostly been talking about in terms of partisan politics, but it is important to remember the Democratic Party are still capitalists, and they still do not have your interests in mind. I'm going to read a couple of bits from this really compelling Medium article, and I'd recommend everybody, go check it out for yourself. Mostly because a lot of it is raw data and statistics that I can't show you a pie chart over the air or something like that. But it's on Medium. It's called "No Voting Democrat Is Not Harm Reduction." It's written by Andrew Dobbs, and he basically lays out a case like he shows like. Here's the data on income and wealth inequality, and he shows how under both Republican and Democratic Congresses and administrations, basically the trends kind of stay the same. And the argument he's trying to make is like big picture economically, it doesn't really matter which party is in charge. The Gini coefficient that he uses. It's a metric to measure income inequality, is more or less the same whether Republicans or Democrats are in charge. And actually, it goes on to talk a little bit about how a lot of these urban areas that Democrats represent end up having a worse Gini coefficient because, we're talking about the cities where there's a lot of concentrated poverty. So a lot of places in California, New York, etc. I wanted to go down to one thing he talks about in particular, something that we talk about on the show a lot. So again, he makes some other really great points about how mass incarceration has been a largely bipartisan project. And then he talks about one of our favorite topics, which is, I guess least favorite topics, which is military-industrial complex. And sorry, I'm scrolling down because this is a very long article. I really recommend it to a lot of folks. But one of the things he brings up, and I'm just going to read this verbatim from the article, because I think this is the crux of what got the radicals out to vote in this election, is this observance that fascism is growing on a global level, and it is a very scary time. So the idea of electing even like a centrist capitalist or voting for a party that represents that seems preferable to people who literally want to kill people for existing. So he addresses that directly, and I think it's a very good point. He says, this is also where we can answer fears of GOP support for fascists and neo-Nazis. This is a very real threat and something we should take very seriously. That said, not only have Democrats not actually run on an explicitly anti-fascist agenda or explain how they would suppress the current fascist insurgency, and, just to take a side note, that is absolutely 100% true. You don't, you see a lot of elected Democrats talking very broadly about like, oh, how chaotic and violent things are in this country. But very few of them are explicitly calling it out for what it is, which is the rise of this white nationalism and fascist tendencies. Some people, like Chuck Schumer, even go so far as to parrot what Trump has said about violence on both sides. So yeah, they have not helped. If anything, they have really hindered a lot of important anti-fascist organizing by like kind of poo-pooing it. But it goes on to point out, and this is really important to bring up historically, they have actively promoted fascism overseas. He cites this example. In the Ukraine, the U.S., under the Obama administration, sponsored neo-Nazi parties that currently dominate the Ukrainian government. And that is 100% true. We talk about the sweep of fascism over in Europe, and particularly in the Ukraine, they had a lot of American assistance. And I think it speaks to a greater, historical trend that, you can notice it now, but it has been this way for a long time. Go back to World War II. FDR, you can find his administration outright praising Mussolini and preferring him to a democratic government because, especially in the Cold War, but even, starting then, the U.S. government prefers fascism that will keep the wheels of capital turning to any sort of social democracy that, while it may actually be just and not commit human rights abuses, could potentially threaten U.S. hegemony, both economically and imperialistically. that's why you will see governments like Salvador Allende's social democracy overthrown, but something like Bolsonaro, who has literally talked about murdering indigenous people, privatizing the rainforest, which would basically
destroy the world,
squeeze the lungs out of the planet. People like him get praised by the U.S. government. This guy got a freaking endorsement from the Wall Street Journal, and he's like an outright fascist.
He got a Trump tweet. He got this Canadian business news article talking about how it's going to be great for our business, eh?
Yeah, and you hear this on like liberal outlets, which, if they actually were what they said they were, would be raising alarm bells about this guy, but they're not. There's, there's this op-ed that was just like, this is like one of the most. You know that Facebook page, Cursed Liberal Opinions? It was like, is Bolsonaro a breath of fresh air and being politically incorrect? And it's like, talking about murdering people is not politically incorrect. It's talking about war crimes here. But he goes on to say, the same is true for Islamist extremists the Obama administration backed in Syria, as well as the reactionary coup he backed in Guatemala. Yes, Trump's footsie with domestic Nazis is outrageous and wrong, but outsourcing the fascist problem to other countries and calling yourself pure is a means of protecting your own neck at someone else's expense. It's not harm reduction, it's harm redistribution, away from the imperial center and towards people we've already screwed over. Oh man, and that part really got to me, and I think you could make an argument. I feel like a lot of the rise of fascism, it's almost like the terror and fascism that we've uplifted across the world, it's almost like it's in this kind of karmic way coming home to roost here in the United States. And in a large way, that's true. It both the war on terror and neoliberalism are huge culprits in creating the kind of economically unstable conditions that allowed somebody like Trump to take power. And you can find a very similar narrative just about anywhere else where these far-right leaders have ascended to roles of status and power.
I just wanted to add that, before and during the Trump administrations, our government is and was still in bed with horrible dreams, such as in Saudi Arabia. Turkey now is having all these fascistic tendencies. A lot of NATO countries have recently elected fascist governments, especially the ones in Eastern Europe. Like, we had the coups that we've done in Central America that also support these fascist governments. These are all relatively recent, by the way, and relatively bipartisan efforts. Now, I still have a bit of a counter argument to the whole to whether or not voting Democrat is a harm reduction, which I would say that it is, and I say that because even if they're slightly more pushing back, they're not supporting fascism at home as opposed to abroad, whereas the Republicans, it's politically convenient and even expedient for them to do that here. The way they win is by cheating. I mean, we've seen this. And they're going to keep on doing it. The way that the Democrats win is if they actually get people to vote for them one way or another. And, as we said before, that's by actually pushing for the policies that people want. But even beside that, what's politically convenient for them is if people actually participate in a functioning democracy. Now, these two highly conflicting motives on maintaining electoral power are what I would say are a big part of making that more harm reduction, as well as these sort of these liberal protections for LGBT people and people of color that would still be small and not really what we need. We do need a revolution, but I'm gonna get to that in a second. But I would still say that it is harm reduction for those reasons here. But what's going on over the whole world, it's really hard to do anything about it. The bipartisan war machine keeps rolling. The deep state is still here. It's still gonna do its thing, even if we get anti-imperialist insurgents in our Congress. If you want to a lot of these Democrats still are horrible war criminals. Like if you look at Alan Nairn, he gives a very similar argument in Democracy Now! He did it about 6 days ago. If you want to go look it up, and that's the end of my thought on that one.
Yeah, it's interesting because the talks we have in these circles, and it's kind of far left circles are very insulated, but my concern with that is I think yes, vote, but also realize Democrats are not your friends. They are not on your side. Now, to critique that from the left, I've seen people just be like, you're still somehow reinforcing them. You're reinforcing imperialism. And it's like you're reinforcing a capitalist party. And, here's the thing. It's the reality. This is the world that we currently live in. And there's a problem with kind of being an accelerationist that things have to get worse before they get better. In the extent that we talk about harm reduction, yes, this article that I read from, it's spot on. And it's absolutely true. And it's definitely true that we export fascism all over the world. However, at the same time, we need to kind of give ourselves some breathing room. And, I'm saying, it's not even necessarily, voting through Democrats. The most significant things on our ballot on yesterday were some nonpartisan ballot initiatives.
I'd say that was the case for most of the country, even.
Yeah. And, I also, my joke yesterday was you're trying to give me a lecture about, I need to, you need to read more communist theory if you think voting is going to do you any good. And I'm like, dude, I just want some good people on my school board, and I want to get high. All right.
Seriously.
It's let me do that.
I guess to go back to a couple other points.
Yeah.
Also, I don't want to get murdered. A hate crime. That'd be great if people in our government didn't encourage violence against marginalized communities.
Yeah, and again, it may be true that the Democrats don't care about you, but it's like Charlene Carruthers said, and I've said this quote several times in the last few episodes, but it's just so poignant. It's like the Democrats don't do anything for me; the Republicans do things to me. And I think Democrats do things to us too. I mean, go ask anybody who was incarcerated in the 90s. But I think it holds true that there particularly right now there is just a viciousness in the Republican base, and that is one of the spooky things about yesterday is a lot of the new Republicans that got in. They are part of the Trump wave, not the red wave, the Trump wave, and they are selling the same kind of
then some.
Yeah, the same kind of nativist, white nationalist politics. I don't even want to say dog whistle, more like dog bullhorn politics that Trump pushes, and it is dangerous. Look at the rhetoric. One of the things it's important to say is Trump's never come out and said that I hate black people, or I hate the Jews, or I hate Mexican, because a lot of people on the right need a very literal admission of racism before they'll admit that it's something
even
racist.
Then it won't be enough.
But look at what's happened in the last few weeks leading up to the election. A synagogue was shot up. You had that black couple that was murdered in a grocery store. That kind of rhetoric from people in power gets people killed. Very literally, it does.
And usually these kind of things, this sort of level of ethnic and political violence, actually emboldens the fascists in a country. But it was this close to an election year, it probably hurt them more than it helped, really.
Yeah. It probably motivated a few more people to get out there and vote.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
No kidding. So, a couple other, one other, I guess, significant point that I was going to get back to, and now here I am. Yeah. So, we do need an actual revolution that goes beyond like voting for new people. That's absolutely what our country needs, what our global society needs. But in my opinion, it's not going to happen. We have, the UN reported we have 12 years to save this planet from its destruction by mostly 100 companies and the, like, you know, Western military apparatus. Now...
And that's definitely not on the ballot. I haven't seen any of the Democrats talking about that.
Like, what, like, first of all, how long do you think it would take to actually organize these people for a revolution that whatever that would look like? Second, how would you get it to beat this massive military/intelligence apparatus that that even our own government's created? Like, forget like the other ones around the world that have also do horrible surveillance. You have to get them to overthrow that and push through the whatever layers of reactionaries you have to work through, who all have guns, by the way.
Yeah, that's
like,
important to...
not only that, like, saying we have 12 years is super generous because, you know, the Amazon rainforest is about to go. Like, it's almost effed up to even, like, suggest, but, like, maybe voting for these nicer imperialists is the best thing we can do in this short time we have left to make our lives less miserable.
Yeah, and, you know, even if you read, like, the history of certain, like... So if you read, like, the history of the Russian Revolution, you know, what happens is a lot of these... It's because they had strongly organized labor. They had, you know, factory committees and Soviets. And the actual start of this 1917 revolution was fairly spontaneous. But you had a strong enough left that it was able to kind of guide, help advise, bring about... you know, what ended up being like the Bolsheviks taking power in the October Revolution. The United States, you look at, you know, in comparison, I mean, it's like you said, there's just so many reactionaries. Like if there was a spontaneous uprising tomorrow, there's no organized voice. You know, I would even say maybe in like 2016. That's something you could have seen. You had more of a bipartisan consensus about, like, oh, corruption is a huge problem and the elites are taking everything. And since then, the Trump administration and, you know, the media in general have done a really good job at repolarizing everyone. If you were to have that revolution tomorrow, I feel like there would be a veritable army of bootlickers at the Capitol to fight for, you know, the
Daddy Trump, basically.
Daddy Trump, yeah. So yeah, it is. I mean, it's a pause for, you know, some despair, but it's also, I think, important to reflect that, you know, you look at how things are today, and you've got to look at, like, what could bring about these conditions that would better suit this complete change that we need in our civilization before we all, you know, kill ourselves off. And any hope that there is not necessarily in looking at electoral politics, but this rise of progressivism that goes from, you know, Bernie Sanders style reform to you know, younger people who are actually starting to really research, like, anarchism and socialism and communism. That's the only way out I see. That, you know, and that's why it's important to challenge not just Republicans, but also Democrats, because they are, left to their own devices, would just basically give us a softer Armageddon, you know, a softer, more comfortable descent into climate hell, among many other things. But
if we can research warp speed in time to get us to that solar system of 7 Earth-like planets, then we'll be fine. Otherwise, it's over.
See, I'm pushing for the singularity. I think we need, like, a form of, like, communistic transhumanism.
I mean, I think
seize the means of the singularity.
You know, the robots could take over and evolve past us to survive what this planet would turn into.
I almost, like, some days I'm just like, you know what? I just hope we live long enough to create artificial intelligence, because, you know, maybe they do a better job with this planet than us. Any thoughts before we close out the show? It is about 7 o'clock.
Try to enjoy your time while you have it. Take care of yourself after such a stressful night last night. And God bless America, man.
Yep. God bless us, everyone. And I want to thank y'all for listening. Again, this has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. We're on every week from 5 to 7. If you want to listen to our show after the fact, we always upload our episodes to YouTube. You can usually find those the night of or the day after. And all y'all out there, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.